All right, last week I asked you if you would be interested in reading the science fiction book Stowaway that I talked about a couple weeks ago. This is about a young man named Leo who has been living on a spaceship ever since Earth was invaded by aliens and his mother was killed by said aliens with his father and his brother. And one day, his father gets kidnapped by more aliens. Huh?
Spoiler alert, it's all a dream. They're actually people who work for their government.
Our posturings, our imagined self-importance, the delusion that we have some privileged position in the universe are challenged by this point of pale light. Our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In our obscurity, in all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. Carl Sagan, Pale Blue Dot, A Vision of the Human Future in Space, 1994. Never judge a planet by its crust. Icarian proverb. Prologue, Chasing Ghosts. They were playing tag when the first torpedo hit. In the narrow hallways of the crew quarters, the clomping of their standard issue coalition boots echoing down the corridors, Gareth chasing Leo, gaining, cornering him at a dead end, reaching out to make the tag, only to find his hand pass right through his brother's chest. Hologram again. Cheater! The hollow flickered, the pre-recorded voice of a sprinting Leo finally timing out, the illusion dissolving into pixelated bits. Leo laughed and Gareth turned to see his brother in the flesh, standing right behind him. A moment's hesitation, muscles tensing, traded smiles. The one saying, "You'll pay for that." The other, "You'll have to catch me first." Then Leo turned and bolted back the way he came, Gareth launching himself in pursuit. Leo knew there was no way he could outrun his older brother. Gareth had been a middle school track star back in Earth, now a tall, wiry 17-year-old. It wasn't a matter of winning for Leo. It was a matter of holding out as long as possible, a question of survival. They'd played this game 100 times before. He turned a corner, headed toward the commissary, conscious of Gareth's feet pounding on the steel grating. Louder, closer. Maybe if he could make it to the door, he could duck inside, find somewhere to hide, and delay the inevitable. But he wasn't fast enough. Gareth's hand whipped out, grabbing Leo by the shoulder, not so much tagging him as lassoing him, pulling him to a stop. Gotcha! Leo spun around, hands on his knees, sucking in recycled air. You okay? Yeah, fine, Leo huffed. Just catching my breath. You cheated again. I told you, you aren't allowed to use that thing. That thing was Leo's watch, a gift his parents had given him a year ago. A hybrid of human and Akari technology, like so many things nowadays. It could be used as a data viewer and a communicator. It kept track of his vitals, his heartbeat was currently at 142 beats per minute. It could tell you where it parked your car. Almost incidentally, it told time. But the watch's most advanced feature was its miniaturized holographic generator, capable of creating three-dimensional projections of pre-recorded videos, like the one of Leo running, recorded with an express purpose of fooling his brother in games of tag or hide-and-go-seek. The projections looked real enough until you got up close and could start to make out the digital imperfections. Their parents had given Gareth the same watch, but he'd lost his long ago, left somewhere in the house they grew up in, on the planet they'd left behind. Dad says technology is the tool that allows us to overcome our limitations and sets us free, Leo reminded his brother. Except you're not free. I still caught you. Because your legs are twice as long as mine. An exaggeration. At one time, it might have been true, but a couple of growth spurts since they'd been on board, and Leo was no longer the scrawny runt whose head fit underneath Garrett's armpit. Not so easy to boss around, though Gareth could still wrestle him to the ground and rip the watch from his wrist if he wanted. Not that he would. Leo knew Gareth would never hurt him. He just wanted to give Leo a hard time. That's what big brothers were for. That and pretty much everything else, especially out here on this ship where Gareth was the only real friend he had. Besides, as long as they played nice, their father wouldn't interrupt to badger them about their studies. And as important as it was to Calvin Fender that his two sons learn how to balance chemical equations or calculate the masses of nearby stars, it was more important that they got along, and chasing each other around the Beagle was always preferable to reading a chapter of galactic history. Leo's breathing finally evened out. He brushed the brown mop out of his eyes, his bangs hanging like curtains in sore need of a trim. The Beagle didn't have a barbershop, just Leo's father, whose DIY haircuts often resulted in disaster. Cosmetology was one of the few things his father wasn't good at. You have to give me at least a 10-second head start, Leo said, and you have to count loud, so I know when to go. Fine, 10 seconds, but seriously, no more cheating. If I catch you, you won't, Leo shot back with mock confidence. Right. Leo coiled, ready to sprint down the corridor as soon as his brother started counting, but Gareth never even made it to one. The explosion nearly threw them off their feet as the Beagle lurched sideways, the steel beam shuddering. Leo's eyes rang, the lights blinked off, on, then off again, triggering the fluorescent yellow emergency lighting that ran along the floor. Leo put his hand on the wall to steady himself. His brother's eyes shone like moons. What was that? The question was answered with a second explosion, the ship quickening again. Every alarm screamed at once. Leo stumbled, falling into his brother's ready arms. From down the corridor, he could hear the crew of the Beagle shouting to one another, though it was impossible to make out what they were saying. It was impossible to hear anything over the ship's wounded bleeding until the captain's voice echoed over the comms. Attention, crew of the Beagle! We are under attack. Security personnel report to the bridge immediately. Engineering to the drive chamber. Leo looked up at his brother, still holding him tight. Did she just say we're under attack? Gareth nodded, then looked sideways, startled by the sound of boot heels clomping down the hall. Leo knew the sound. He'd learned to recognize the rhythm of his father's footfalls, like the sound of his brother's snoring or his mother's pensive sighs. Leo spied his father turning to the corner, his eyes falling on him and Gareth pressed together. Dr. Calvin Fender's face softened, then hardened again. He spoke in a whirlwind. What are you two doing here? Didn't you hear what Captain Sato said? You need to hide. Hurry! Their father pointed to the nearest door, leading to an empty bunk room barely half the size of the one the Fenders shared. He hustled Gareth and Leo into a corner, his white lab coat flapping on both sides like broken wings. Leo could tell he was scared. He could see it in his father's eyes, even if he couldn't hear it in his voice. His father was seldom scared. Dr. Fender tipped over a metal desk, making a barrier, concealing the boys from anyone passing by the door. Stay right here. Do not move. Understand? What's going on? Leo asked. Are we really under attack? Is it pirates? Worse, their father said. Worse than pirates? The Jark, Leo thought, and from the look on Gareth's face, he knew it too. They've knocked out our engines and navigation systems, Dr. Fender continued. Communications too. I believe they intend to board us. You mean they're coming on the ship? Leo felt his chest tighten, a coil wrapping tight, working its way up to his throat. He wheezed in a painful breath. Dad, I think he's about to have an attack, Gareth said. Dr. Fender bent over, patting down Leo's pockets. Leo reached for it as well, finding what he needed, fumbling with the cap of his inhaler, squeezing the trigger, and hearing the familiar hiss of medicine. The cool sensation as it snaked its way into his lungs, loosening the noose. Leo took a shuddering breath. You're okay, his father whispered, hands on Leo's shoulders. It's okay, just breathe. I'm right here. We're both right here. Leo closed his eyes and took in his father's voice, the hint of coffee on his father's breath, the feel of his father's hands, and for a moment, he was somewhere safe. He had imagined himself back at home. Home. Until another small blast caused the ship to shiver again, bringing Leo back. In the corridor, even the emergency lights started to flicker. The Beagle was wounded, limping, its engines disabled. The Giark were preparing to board. Dr. Fender leveled a finger at his sons. Whatever happens, you two stay here, understand? Gareth, you're in charge. You keep your brother safe. I will be back as soon as I can. Gareth nodded, but Leo reached out for his father's coat. Wait, where are you going? To engineering, to see if I can do something to help with the navigation system. Hopefully the security team can hold off the Giark long enough for us to break free and make a jump. Stay here. Keep yourselves hidden. Dr. Fender gathered his sons in an embrace that lasted all of 10 hammering heartbeats. I love you both more than anything.